What is law? What should it be? Where should the power of the legislator stop? These were the questions that Frederick Bastiat was attempting to answer in his short book, aptly named The Law. Bastiat was a French economist and a philosopher known for his promotion of free trade and criticism of socialism. We don't have liberty and property because we have law. We actually make laws to protect our pre-existing rights to liberty and property. The right to liberty and property is a pre-existing right. It pre-exists man-made laws. It's natural law. As individuals, we have rights to three preserving elements of life: the right to defend yourself, the right to property, and the right to liberty. To protect those individual rights on a larger scale, we as individuals will form a collective and create policy to protect these rights. And these policies are what we call laws. Now, these collective rights, they have their foundation in the individual rights that we just talked about. If a man has the right to defend himself, then a group of men have the right to come together and organize and create a common force to provide for this defense. Since it wouldn't be right for the individual man to infringe upon the life, the liberty, or the property of another, it follows that it would not be right for a collective to infringe upon the rights of another collective, or even an individual. The law is the organization of natural rights. It is the substitution of the individual force for the collective. Now, this collective seeks to keep men within the boundaries of justice, but the law is often perverted. It is guilty of the very crime that it seeks to punish. It acts often in opposition of its mission. There's two reasons for this perversion: greed and misconceived philanthropy. Let's touch on greed first. Man sustains his life and he gets enjoyment through his labor. This is the origin of property. But man can also sustain his life and possibly get enjoyment by taking what other men have worked for and built for themselves. This is the origin of plunder. Because, let's face it, labor is hard and it's often painful. And history shows us that man will choose plunder over labor if plunder is easier than labor. So, how do we stop plunder? Well, we have to make plunder more difficult and painful than labor. And that's the objective of the law: to oppose the tendency of plunder with collective force. But for a collective to create laws, the collective must give this power of legislation over to a man or a group of men. These men who legislate, they're men just like you and me. They're no different than the men who would plunder because it's easier than working. Every legislative group will be prone to creating laws that benefit themselves. That's just human nature. This is how the law becomes perverted. It's easy to imagine that greedy men would use the law for their own gain, and we see it all the time. Greed is the natural human tendency, and from this tendency is the tendency to plunder. Now, I'm using this word plunder a lot. Plunder is basically just a word for taking what does not belong to you. Now, there's two types of plunder. There's extra-legal plunder, such as theft or fraud. But then there's legal plunder, such as taking what belongs to others by means such as taxation to give to others something that doesn't belong to them. If the law can be used for plunder, why wouldn't everyone attempt to get their hands on the law? It's understandable that different groups would want to benefit themselves from the law. They see others doing it. It's understandable that this legal plunder is perpetuated by people that elect legislators who will make laws to benefit themselves. Even the poor man will seek to get his plunder through welfare and public assistance. In regard to plunder, the law can produce three possible results. You've got partial plunder, that's where a few plunder the many. You've got universal plunder, where everyone plunders everyone. But then the desirable is the absence of plunder. No one plunders anyone. The absence of plunder should be the goal of the law. But because men are greedy, we see the law perverted and used for plunder. Now that we've touched on greed a little bit, let's touch on that misconceived philanthropy. Philanthropy is the desire to promote the welfare of others. Now, philanthropy is a good thing, but is it a good thing when the philanthropy is coming from the government? You know, many do not consider it enough that the law should be just. They say it must also be philanthropic. It is not sufficient that it should guarantee liberty and justice. It is required to extend well-being, instruction, morality directly over the nation. And if you suggest doubt as to the morality of these laws, you're labeled as an oppressor, a racist. They'll say you're privileged or that you're just a bad person. If you object to the government doing something, you are said to object of it being done at all. If you object to education by the state, then it is said you are against education. If you object to equality being brought about by the state, then you object to equality. But guess what? Philanthropy exists outside the government, and it is philanthropy by the government that actually creates injustices. When a portion of wealth is taken from the person that acquired it without his consent to the person that did not earn it by force, property has been violated. These two missions of law, justice and philanthropy, are contradictory. You have to choose between the two. We should abolish laws that try to take from some to give to others. Why do we need a philanthropic government? Are men and women of government so much more virtuous and intelligent than their constituents that they must save us or use our resources for the common good? Let these government officials try their social experiments at their own risk and expense, not by force and public taxes. If mankind is not competent enough to judge for themselves, then why do we hear so much about the right to vote and about groups whose vote is oppressed? This seems like a contradiction. If men do not think they can lift themselves up by their own hard work and expect everything from the government, then the relationship between citizen and government is that of the sheep to the shepherd. This gives immense responsibility and power to the government. The government should not have absolute power over our persons and property because these rights pre-exist government. Government's role is to protect these rights. When law and force keep a man within the bounds of justice, they impose nothing on him but a negation. These laws require him to keep from doing harm. They do not violate his personality, liberty, or property. When the law imposes by force, it is no longer a negative, but acts positively on men. You cannot impose morality upon men with the law. The law is force, and by attempting to force morality, you organize injustice. No society can exist unless laws are respected. The safest way to make them respected is to make them respectable and not pervert them. When law and morality are in contradiction to each other, the citizen has to choose between losing his moral sense or losing his respect for the law. Historically, when citizens reach this point, they rise against their governments, revolutions occur, and we see the downfall of a nation. So what is law? Law is justice. Nothing should be attempted by the law or by force except the administration of universal justice. Thanks for watching this video. Do you agree or disagree with Bastiat's perspective? Let me know in the comments, and take the time to read The Law by Frederick Bastiat